After 100 days in detention, former Taipei mayor and presidential candidate Ko Wen-je is released on bail. Too exposed, a vital Navy missile defense unit is drawing fire for being too out in the open. Is China showing off its newest warplane? Futuristic fighter jets are seen flying over the city of Chengdu. Plus, political turmoil in South Korea continues with the second impeachment of a president within a month. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. Former Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je has been released on bail after a hearing that lasted into the early hours of Friday morning. The one-time presidential hopeful has been charged with bribery and mishandling of political funds, and prosecutors are seeking a prison sentence of close to 30 years. Tiffany Wong reports.
Walking free for the first time in over 4 months, former Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je heads home with a smile on his face after spending most of his corruption investigation held incommunicado. He was visibly emotional as he addressed supporters outside his home, maintaining his innocence after prosecutors officially charged him with acts of corruption.
有时候感谢上苍给我这个机会，可以反省一下自己的人生，你知道吗？我还是相信我自己不是那种什么图利啦、贪污啦、会违法的人嘛。但是会遇到这种风风雨雨，你知道吗？表示我们人生还是有地方要检讨。
Ko is implicated in a corruption scandal involving a land redevelopment project when he was mayor. He's also been charged with misusing political funds during his failed run for president this year. 4 others charged in the case were offered bail on Friday, including Ko's former deputy mayor and the head of a company in charge of the development project in question. Their combined bail is over $3 million. Ko is the most high-profile figure in the case. A crowd outside the courthouse erupted in cheers early Friday morning when the judge struck down the prosecutor's request to extend his detention. Leading members of the party he founded, the Taiwan People's Party, were also there.
我们从来没有放弃过，但是我要拜托大家一件事，我们接下来还有更辛苦的仗要打，请大家一定要记得一件事，这不是只是为了阿北个人，这是为了我们深爱的土地，为了台湾的民主，为了台湾的法治，我们会一直跟阿北走下去，永远不会放弃。
Ko supporters have called the charges a political attack by the ruling Democratic Progressive Party to shut down the TPP as a rising third party. The party plays a vital swing role in the legislature, and Ko ran strongly in this year's presidential election. The trial is expected to last months, and if found guilty, Ko faces a potential 28.5 years in prison if the prosecutors get their way. But his release, even if temporary, is a welcome relief to his family, party, and supporters. Fua Hong and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
For more on how the case against Ko and his co-defendants may play out, Chris Gorin spoke to attorney Colin Wu from the law firm Lin and Partners.
So prosecutors have charged Ko Wen-je with a number of crimes related to corruption. But what exactly is Ko being accused of here?
Based on the press release from the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office, so the accusation against Mr. Ko can be divided into, I would say, 3 major areas. So the first will be Mr. Ko is accused of accepting 2 bribes in amount of 2.1 million and 15 million NT dollars. That is in terms of the floor area incentive for the Jinhua City project. They increased the floor area ratio for the core Pacific project to 840%, meaning that a taller building can be constructed. And the second one would be the embezzlement of 6 million NT dollars political donations from the Taiwan People's Parties. The alleged purpose for the portrait rights and the payment of salaries to the MUKA employees and the investment in other companies. MUCA is a company that is formed by Mr. Ko, I believe. The third major area will be the misuse of the 8 million funds from the Zhongwang Foundation to pay the salaries for the personnel involved in election-related activities. So I think another thing worth mentioning is that Ms. Ko pleaded not guilty during the investigation stage and also the detention hearing in the Taipei District Court.
Prosecutors have recommended a sentence of more than 28 years if he's convicted of all of these crimes. That seems like quite a lot for white-collar crimes. Is this typical of this kind of case?
So the 28 years is like an accumulation of all the accusation brought by the prosecutor. And typically, the court will not accept such a high sentence. So that is kind of I think just a suggestion from the prosecutor, and the court has no obligation to follow such sentence suggestions, especially for former government officials. Typically, the court will, if Mr. Ko is found guilty, so the court will issue or render a relatively, I would say, a longer period of sentence against the former government officials.
Typically, how long does one of these cases take? Do you expect this to wrap up before the next local elections in 2 years?
I don't think so, because in my, like, in the sense of the judges, like the practice of Taiwanese court, I don't think that the court will like take into the legislation election into consideration where rendering the judgment. So it will all depend on the progress of this case, such as whether how many witnesses will be subpoenaed during the hearings. So the more witnesses subpoenaed, the longer the trial will be.
That was Chris Gorin speaking with attorney Colin Wu. A prominent Taipei politician has been sentenced to 9 years in prison for corruption. Taipei City Councilor Chen Hongwen was found guilty of pocketing over $110,000 in a subcontracting scheme. He abused his position by pressuring the city's social welfare department to use services provided by a company he controlled. Other defendants, including Chen's wife, received lighter sentences. The verdict can still be appealed. The Defense Ministry has declined to give TaiwanPlus further explanation as to why some of its most critical weapons were deployed within public view, a move some say is a security risk. Jaime Ocon explains.
These Taiwanese Navy personnel are part of a special unit known as the Haifeng Brigade. They're tasked with one core mission: destroying enemy ships. And by carrying missiles in massive trucks, they're able to deploy almost anywhere in the country. Earlier this year, TaiwanPlus got a chance to see one of the brigades in action as they conducted a simulated defense of a port against pretend Chinese ships.
近年来，更从固定阵地转型为机动飞弹车组，并挂载了雄风3型反舰飞弹。
Established in the 1980s, the Haifeng Missile Brigade has seen a surge in investment in recent years, spurred by the military pressure from China, which has the world's largest navy and threatens to invade Taiwan. Analysts here in Taiwan say that the Haifeng Brigade is a core part of Taiwan's asymmetric strategy, leaning more on missiles to offset the costs of expensive warships.
因为台湾的资源 resources 比较有限，所以就不能采取传统海军的这个做法。那所以在这种情况下，台湾作为一个防卫者，就是有足够的飞弹的话，就可以阻止中国的两栖登陆。那当然就可以让台湾有很高的机会可以防卫成功了。
The Haifeng Brigade was deployed multiple times during several of China's recent large military exercises around the country, giving the public a glimpse of one of the country's most secretive weapon systems. Critics argue that the public display poses a security risk, as the weapons are repeatedly deployed in the same location and are easily trackable due to their size.
There is a huge convoy that's the track attentions and everyone know where it is. The bigger the convoy, of course, the higher the profile that they are. You can bet that a remote sensing satellite, a Chinese remote sensing satellite from space, take a photo, they can see easily on a highway.
A Chinese company has already used dozens of pictures uploaded by Taiwanese media to map out what they suspect are the system's transportation routes and where they would be stationed. Taiwan's defense ministry has said that during wartime, there would be many places they could be deployed.
我们主要现在就在着重在于这个在战力保存的阶段，要着重于信息管理。那我们要部署的战术位置也不是只有一个。
Analysts from Taiwan's government-backed think tank argue that in an actual conflict, this massive convoy, which includes the radar, a command center, and the missiles, would never be in the same place at the same time.
大概是3个 module， 3个模组，所以它要去一个就是 set up 一个 position， 其实很快，就不会像现在就是可能看到你在一个停车场就会就是容易看到它。在真正战时的时候，它这3个 module 会分开的。
While Taiwan navigates how to correctly use and deploy its new systems, the Navy has plans to expand the Haifeng Brigade across the country. While the brigade's weapons seem necessary for Taiwan's defense, it remains unclear if the military has nailed down the tactics necessary to use them effectively. Andy Shrey and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
2 new Chinese military aircraft have been seen conducting flight tests over the city of Chengdu. The 2 apparent fighter jets are thought to be part of a stealth aircraft program that China has not publicly revealed. In videos shared on social media, they are seen flying within hours of each other. Experts have speculated that the second one could be part of China's 6th-generation aircraft program. China has yet to comment on these 2 new fighter jets. For more on China's 6th-generation fighter, Bryn Thomas spoke to Ewan Graham, the acting director of the Australian Strategic Policy Foundation.
Can you tell me what your immediate reaction is to these images of what many people are calling China's first 6th-generation fighter?
I think we have to be cautious until we know more about the design specifics. But the decision itself to reveal this in daylight, in what looks like a coordinated way with yet another potential 6G aircraft design from China, it shows that China wants to get the message out that it's got a new capability in the air and is not afraid of being transparent in that limited sense. But the race is on. I think it's a clear reminder that China, that the United States and its allies don't have a cushion they can sit on in terms of the technological lead that they have in high-performance aircraft.
Can you tell me what makes something a 6th-generation fighter? What, for example, is the difference between a 5th and a 6th-generation fighter?
I think the key variable from the look of this design is stealth. Stealth is specific to 5th-generation designs onward. That said, it does also, with the swept wing design, obviously suggest that this is capable of supersonic flight. That goes right back to the 4G generation of aircraft, right back to the 1950s. We shouldn't forget that although China has made leaps and bounds in aviation technology and the PLA more generally, it is still stuck in the bomber mode with a very early 1950s airframe design, which they've innovated a great deal on. But the linkage is clear. If China is making particular advances in manned aviation and uncrewed platforms to accompany that, then the airspace is more contested. It's more difficult for the US and its partners to operate throughout the first island chain, which is the main zone of contention with China. And that, of course, includes Taiwan for your audience.
That was Ewan Graham from the Australian Strategic Policy Foundation. South Korea's National Assembly has voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo less than 2 weeks after impeaching President Yoon Suk-yeol. Han took over from Yoon, who was ousted over a botched martial law declaration early this month. Though Yoon has been stripped of his powers, the Constitutional Court must now decide whether to remove him from office. Han said he would not fill vacancies on the court until the assembly agreed on whether an acting president has such powers. In response, the opposition Democratic Party moved to impeach him. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok will replace Han as acting president. Taiwanese chip giant TSMC's first factory in Japan has started mass producing advanced semiconductors. The chips use 12 to 28 nanometer processes and will mainly be used in image sensors in cars. The fab in Kumamoto is part of Japan's plan to strengthen its domestic supply chain, supporting local companies like Sony. Construction of a second factory is scheduled to start at the beginning of next year. Coming up after the break, did Russian air defenses shoot down an Azerbaijan passenger plane? Stay tuned.
From industrial parks in Taiwan to here in Vietnam, we're bringing you the latest in tech and business news right here on TaiwanPlus News.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Suspicions are mounting that an Azerbaijan Airlines plane that crashed in Kazakhstan on Wednesday, killing 38 people, was downed by a Russian air defense system. Images have emerged on social media that appear to show shrapnel damage on the wreckage. Joyce Zeng has more.
Returning home after a nightmare flight on Christmas Day, Azerbaijani survivors of the deadly plane crash near Aktau city in Kazakhstan arrived back in Azerbaijan's capital Baku and were met with emergency responders and medics. The Embraer 190 passenger plane was supposed to fly from Baku to Grozny in southern Russia, an area where Moscow and Kyiv are engaged in active combat. The plane was instead diverted hundreds of miles off course for an emergency landing, crashing in a ball of fire in Kazakhstan, killing 38 of the 67 people on board. There are mixed reports over what caused the crash, with Azerbaijani and U.S. officials suspecting a Russian missile hit the passenger plane, an explanation backed by some aviation experts.
C'est que l'analyse des débris de l'avion permet de savoir un petit peu plus sur la cause et notamment ces traces qui sont notamment sur la queue de l'appareil. On a de l'extérieur et de l'intérieur des preuves qu'il y a bien eu des shrapnels qui ont traversé l'avion. C'est forcément un missile de défense aérienne.
16 of the plane's passengers were Russians, and as those who survived arrived near Moscow, the Kremlin reiterated its warning against jumping to unfounded conclusions, with investigators in Kazakhstan yet to release any results. Meanwhile, foreign governments like Brazil and Canada have sent their own officials to aid investigations and called on Russia for an open and transparent probe. Speaking to Reuters, sources with knowledge of the case so far say Baku expects Moscow to confess to shooting down the plane, a situation that would make more countries wary of the Kremlin.
And so if they aren't given some sort of assurance that these flights won't be shot down by Russian air defense systems, this could lead to disagreements between Russia and the states that not only border Russia, but have been critical in ensuring that Russia has been able to evade Western-led sanctions from its invasion of Ukraine.
Celebrations here this holiday season have now been muted as people mourn those lost on that Christmas flight. And with answers still elusive and unclear, uncertainty pervades along with grief. Hank Xu and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
Finland says it has seized an oil tanker it believes was responsible for damaging undersea power and communication cables on Wednesday. Coast Guard officers boarded and sailed the vessel to Finnish waters for further investigation. The ship is believed to be part of Russia's shadow fleet of aging tankers that seek to evade sanctions on Russian oil. The incident comes after a Chinese vessel was suspected of cutting 2 undersea cables in Swedish territorial waters in November. Brazil says working conditions at a local factory owned by Chinese EV maker BYD are slavery-like.
As condições degradantes estavam no trabalho e no alojamento. Os alojamentos superlotados, sem colchões, com armazenamento, preparo e realização das refeições, sem conservação e higiene, alimentos armazenados diretamente no chão.
Officials say the more than 160 workers were also given nearly no days off, working 60 to 70 hours per week. The Chinese contractor that runs the factory says the description of slavery-like conditions is inaccurate and that there were misunderstandings due to mistranslation. China's BYD is one of the fastest-growing car companies in the world, poised to outsell brands such as Ford and Honda globally in 2024. Brazil is its largest market outside of China. Japan's cabinet has approved a record budget for its next fiscal year, increasing spending by 2.6% over the current year. Government debt servicing and Social Security costs are the main drivers of the proposed $730 billion budget. Defense spending would also increase by over 9% from the current year to $55 billion. Despite a high level of debt, record high tax revenues would allow Tokyo to issue the fewest bonds in 17 years. The budget may face hurdles in the legislature, where it would need support from opposition parties to pass. Hundreds of people gathered in southern Thailand to mark the 20th anniversary of the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami. They held a ceremony and performed religious rites at a tsunami memorial wall to pay their respects to victims of the disaster. The event was held in one of Thailand's hardest hit provinces, where the disaster took 5,400 lives. The tsunami was caused by a 9.1 magnitude earthquake, which claimed over 230,000 lives across several countries in the region. Thailand is just one of 14 countries affected by the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami. In Indonesia, where the disaster had its epicenter, survivors are urging the government to step up preparedness for the next seismic threat. Bryn Thomas reports.
20 years after the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami, Marziani still wonders if she could have done more to save her husband and 2 children.
Jadi waktu itu saya nangis terus. Teringat merasa bersalah, bukan nangis apa. Merasa bersalah, kenapa saya nggak sanggup jaga anak saya gitu. Padahal kalau kita pikir memang kita nggak mampu, diri sendiri aja kita nggak mampu, apalagi harus menggendong anak kan kayak gitu.
On the morning of December 26, 2004, a massive magnitude 9.1 underwater earthquake rattled Sumatra and triggered a tsunami that spread outward across the Indian Ocean. The UN estimates its waves killed over 220,000 people in 14 countries, including Thailand, India, and Sri Lanka. Indonesia, in particular, the western province of Aceh, was by far the worst hit, with some estimates saying 167,000 were killed and 650,000 were displaced. The waters swept thousands of bodies out to sea, and local and international agencies, overwhelmed, were forced to bury many people unidentified in mass graves.
60-an, 80-an lah, Pak. Kita bawa ke ini, ke apa? Kesdam, Pak. Kesdam, Pak. Kesdam semua. Ada berapa ratus kira-kira yang belum diangkat lagi? Masih banyak, Pak. Tim bantaran sungai sampai ke Lambu, sampai ke sana. Ada 100-200? Ada. Mungkin ada, Pak. Ada. Masih banyak. Ini air belerang.
Volunteers like Jarfuden found themselves covered in blood and mud, collecting bodies, some missing limbs and others crushed to death. 20 years later, he's still haunted by what he witnessed.
Yang anak-anak yang kecil-kecil kita lihat masih rasanya kita angkat dia masih dalam kondisi hidup tapi meninggal begitu lemas mereka.
Indonesia, located on the Pacific Rim of Fire and prone to seismic disasters, has faced criticism for poor disaster preparedness. In 2004, faulty sirens and inadequate evacuation routes led to tragic overcrowding in narrow alleys where many people drowned. Since then, the country's geophysics agency has made efforts to improve.
Untuk alat-alat sendiri, BMKG dari tahun terjadinya gempa besar tsunami sudah perkembangan pesat. Sekarang sudah ada 25 sensor, baik itu non-colo ataupun collocated, artinya ada 2 sensor yang ditempatkan secara bersamaan, baik itu accelerometer ataupun seismometer.
The agency's system alerts residents to earthquakes over magnitude 5, with sirens signaling tsunami risks and regular emergency response training provided. However, survivors of 2004 argue these measures fall short, citing congested escape routes, poorly maintained roads, and rarely tested sirens, especially outside urban areas.
Karena kalau sekiranya kami tahu waktu itu gunung tuh kan nggak jauh kita lari, ya, gunung tuh nggak jauh. Jadi karena keminiman ilmu kita, ya makanya banyak terjadi korban.
Peringatan tsunami itu kemarin hari-hari tahun itu ada bunyi, tapi waktu peringatan ini nggak ada lagi.
20 years on, the scars of the Indian Ocean tsunami remain, but so do the lessons. Survivors hope that improved systems and awareness will save lives when the next disaster strikes. Dolphin Chen and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching Taiwan Plus News. Finally, come with us to southern Tunisia for the 56th Sahara Festival. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.